Hi friends, welcome to the Tech Talk with Shekhar. In this video, we will try to discuss about the new feature of C# 5.0, that is asynchronous programming model. Let's try to first understand about the synchronous programming model. So to understand, let's try to check out with a simple demo and let's observe what are the things that we try to do in a synchronous programming model. Let's start the demo. Now let's try to open our visualstudio.net and understand how a synchronous programming model works. I just go for File menu, New, Project. I select the WPF application. I say Sync Programming Application Demo. Let the project get created. Let's try to create a simple process and understand what exactly is happening. I just try to split the grid and let me just try to place a button where the content, let me increase the font size for your visibility. I just say click here to download. I just wanted to place this content in the row 0. Now I would like to have a text box where the name for the text box, I would like to provide it as txt content, and I would like to provide a text wrapping as wrap. I would like to provide a vertical scroll bar. Visibility, I make it as visible, and this I would like to place in the row 1. So now my requirement is whenever the user clicks on the click here to download, I just wanted to open some web content and I just wanted to load that particular content onto this thing. And for achieving this, let's try to check out the synchronous programming model. Now let me select my control. I just go for the events of this button. Let me handle the click event. Now once I enter into the click event, I would like to use a class for downloading the content called as web client, which is present under system.net. I just simply say wc, an object for this, and created an object for the web client. In a typical synchronous programming model, which is the default model which we use for working with any visual programming, what we can do is we can just create an object. I define a variable like say data, and I just try to use a method. For example, there is a method available called as download string, which takes the address. So I simply specify http:// my internet TV channel name, that is loktv.net. I just specify. Once I just specified this thing, now what I try to do is this content I can just simply assign to this. So the synchronous programming model is very simple. We just create an object and we try to invoke the method by passing some parameter. Once the complete method processing has been done, then the result is assigned back to the data, and that information wherever we want, we can just use it. So for example, to understand this in a proper way, I try to add a debug dot, which is available under system.diagnostics. Let me just try to call this. Before calling the download string method, I just simply specify debug.writeLine after calling the download string method. Okay, so now what happens is, let me just try to execute this thing. This is my output window. Let me just clear it off so that we can understand it proper. I click on this particular button before calling the download string. Once this content is loaded, you got a message called as after calling the download string method. Means till this particular content is going to get loaded, the process will halt. For better understanding, what I try to do was, let me try to refactor this particular entire thing into a method. So I try to extract it as a method, download data. Now, everything I've just written within this. So now what I try to do was, I just try to replace this particular code here before calling the download data method. And I just simply specify here data has been downloaded, and here I just try to write a simple statement saying that after calling the download data. So what I'm trying to do is, I just created a method called as download data, where I'm calling this particular download method in a synchronous way. Now if I try to execute this, I just clear it all, I just click on this. I can see that before calling the downloaded data method, data has been downloaded. After that, you can just observe it after calling the download data method is executing. Means when this particular download data method is processing, the control is not reached to the button, or the control has not reached to the user interface. Once it completes this particular execution, then only the control reaches. That's the default model, which we call it as synchronous model. And because of this reason, the problem what we face is, whenever the method or the task what we are going to execute takes more number of time or huge time, then the user interface freezes. Sometimes it gets locked. To resolve this particular problem, C# 2.0 has introduced a new programming model that is called as asynchronous programming model, which is popularly called as APM. Now let's try to understand how APM model of C# 2.0 works with a simple demo. Let's start with the demo. Let me open once again the Visual Studio.NET for understanding the asynchronous programming model. So let me just click on new project. I select WPF application. I provide a meaningful name, async demo application. Now we are going to understand how in C# 2.0 this asynchronous programming model is achieved. And I would like to do the same application what we have developed using synchronous programming model. So to save the time, what I try to do was, let me just try to copy the code what we have done for the designing, and let me just try to place it here. So I just copied the code, I just pasted. For your visibility, let me increase the font size so you can understand this. So we just splitted the grid into two rows. where in the first row I placed a button and in the second row I placed a text box. Now my requirement is when the user clicks on download site content, I would like to use an asynchronous programming model and I wanted to load the content here. To do this, let me first open my property window. I go to the event handler. Let me go to the click event handler so that we can handle the things. Let me once again increase the font size for your visibility. I try to simply call debug, which is present in system.diagnostics namespace dot right line. I just say button click. So once I have this thing, let me create an object for the web client, where this web client is present within system.net namespace. I'm creating an object for the web client. Once I created an object for the web client, now what I try to do was I would like to call the download string. Web client class provides an asynchronous method for downloading this. So what I try to do was I simply say wc dot, which is my object, download string async, and this particular method takes an URI as a parameter. So I simply say a new URI. I try to pass on my internet web channel www.loktv.net. Once I just specified this, if you just try to observe here, I have something called as download string async, where the return type is void. Means this method is not going to return anything directly. Now, if that is going to be the case, the downloaded content, how do I display it? We try to attach an event handler called as download string completed. So this download string completed event handler will provide the result. Now what I try to do was I just simply say once the content has been downloaded, here I say debug.writeLine download site content completed, and I would like to specify txt content.text equal to whatever the result that we are going to get, that result will be available in e.result, and e is going to be the download string completed event arguments variable. In case while executing the method, if you get any kind of error, that error can be traced by e.error. Now whenever you wanted to collect the result, I can simply say e.result. As the download string original return type is going to be string, e.result type will dynamically set it as string. Now to understand it better, what I do was debug.writeLine download string async method. I just specify after calling download string async method. This is just for our understanding whether this particular method is executing and we are waiting till the result is retrieved or not. Now let me just try to execute it and let us try to check out how the process is happening. Let me once again clear this output window so that we can understand everything properly. I just try to click on download site content. I can just try to observe one small difference between the previous output and this output. Button clicked, and then after calling download string async method, I'm not waiting till the download site content is completed. Whereas in the previous case, what was happening is we were waiting till the site content is downloaded. So in this way we could able to achieve the asynchronous programming model. But what is the problem with this particular model is, if you just observe it, we are totally deviating from the traditional application development. We are trying to handle this with the support of two methods. One, I'm just trying to call the method, and the other one, the event handler is handling the task. And whatever the functionality that we have to collect it, that we are trying to do within the event handler. Whereas this is not a traditional approach, which is totally different. I have to depend on two methods, and there is an event handler coming into picture, and within the event handler we have to handle it. But sometimes whenever there is some kind of requirement such that if iterations has to be done, handling this type of things will not be that easier. Now, to overcome this, what is the solution that has been provided? Let's observe. Now let's try to understand C# 5.0, the new programming model, asynchronous programming model, and let's understand how this particular problem will be resolved in C# 5.0. We have been introduced with two new keywords. One we call it as async, the other one we call it as await. Await keyword is used to mark asynchronous calls, so that you don't need to create a callback functions anymore, and we can write code in the same way as it is a synchronous code. The compiler will do all the heavy lifting work for us. Whenever the code is a async code, we need to use a keyword called as async keyword, and it should be presented within the method signature to make asynchronous calls. Briefly, we can say that whenever await keyword is used, async keyword should be prefixed with the method signature. Let's try to understand this with a simple demo, and let's observe how C# 5.0 asynchronous programming model resolves this particular issue. Before we start with the demo, let's try to have a brief idea about the async as well as await keywords. C# 5.0 CTP is now packed with async and await keywords, which allows the developers to write asynchronous code but with a structure similar to a synchronous code. So whenever we try to use this async as well as await keyword, it allows the developers to write the asynchronous code with a structure that will be similar to that of asynchronous. What we can accomplish with async and await keywords means, we can write asynchronous code with a synchronized code structure. By using await, you don't have to worry about modifying the UI elements in an asynchronous operations. There is no need to use the synchronization context object explicitly. In UI application, the UI will be responsive during the asynchronous operations, and will not be grayed out. Exceptions handling can be done just similar to that of a synchronous code. Points to remember about async and await. We can use async modifier to a method, anonymous method, or lambda expressions, which will have the await operations in it. All methods that have the await operations should be marked with the async keyword. This rule applies to control event as well. The await operator can be used only on a method with a async modifier. An async method can return only void task or task of T. Basically, it should be awaitable type. An awaitable type is the one that will have a get awaiter method returning the awaiter instance. The awaiter in turn has a begin await, end await methods along with an is completed property. Microsoft recommends suffixing the asynchronous method name with async. For example, instead of defining the method name as hello world, the recommended name will be hello world async. Multiple await statements can be added into a single async method. These are some of the points that I would like to provide you before we start with the demo. But in another video, I will be providing you a complete idea on what is this particular awaiter, what is get awaiter method, how the get awaiter method returns some value, how the begin and end await method works, etc. Now hope you have a brief idea at least what is this async and await. Now let's try to open the application what we have created earlier for understanding the synchronous programming model, and let's try to convert that application to the asynchronous programming model which is supported by C# 5.0. Now let me just try to open it. asynchronous programming model, and let me just try to execute the application. And once again, let me just clear the output so that we can understand it properly. I click on the button. Before calling the download data, data has been downloaded after calling the download data method. Now we just understood that once the method has been invoked, till the method has completed its processing, we are not able to handle it. Now let me just try to close this application and let us try to convert this to a asynchronous method. Now the points what we have to understand is, now I just try to specify debug dot writeline download data method invoked. Now in order to make this particular method as a asynchronous, what I can do is I can simply say the method type as async. Now once I just specify the method as async, I just observed there is an error. This async method lacks await operator and will run synchronously. So whenever you wanted to use this, it is compulsory that we have to use something called as await. Now what I try to do was, instead of using a download string method, we have a new method that is introduced for supporting this await operator. So like the way we used to handle a synchronous programming model, what I can do is, there is a method available for us called as download string task async, which accepts a string. So I just specify once again http://www.loctv.net. Now once I just specify this, we can see that you're going to get an error. The reason for this particular error is, whenever you're going to use a method which is going to be an asynchronous one, should be a method that should return either a task or a task of t, or it should be a void, and it should be basically an awaitable. As I already said that understanding awaitable, get awaited, begin await, end await, we will be discussing in another video. Now basic idea to start with asynchronous program model we are trying to observe now. Now in order to resolve this error, what I do is simply I use a keyword called as await. Now if you just try to observe one thing, it's more or less equivalent to the traditional synchronous way of programming. I created an object, defined a variable, I am just trying to call the method, and whatever the method result is there, I am assigning to the variable the way we used to do it. But this particular thing works in a asynchronous way. Let me just try to execute this thing once again. Let me just try to clear the output window. I click on the button. Now you can just observe the messages that are available before calling the download data method and download data method invoke. And you can just observe it immediately. I'm getting a message called as after calling the download data method. After calling the download data method is an instruction which I provided within the button click. So what is happening is I'm not waiting for the data to download. So the programming model what I have used is an asynchronous programming model, but the way that you are going to handle will be like a synchronous model. So this is a new programming model approach that has been introduced in C#. Let's see again in my next video. Pass on your comments and likes to my Facebook. For more videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yours, Shekhar.